Since the Taliban seized the Afghan capital on August 14th, more than 70,000 people have been evacuated, only 4,000 of those being American citizens and their family members. The majority of evacuees have been Afghan nationals, some of whom will likely make their way to America. Not everyone is eager to accept this influx of Afghan refugees. Former senior aide to President Trump, Steve Cortes, offered his take in the National Pulse, writing, "Migration to the United States should exist for one purpose only: to enhance the prosperity and security of existing American citizens, whether native-born or legally naturalized. In a time of pandemic and a fast-rising economic anxiety, the present is no time to welcome vast amounts of refugees into America, many of whom will require enormous resources from taxpayers." So, is he correct? Does our country need an added influx of migrants? And do we have an obligation to some of these migrants? We'll deal with that right now with our friend Steve Cortes. He's the host of Cortes and Pellegrino on Newsmax. He's with us now. Steve, appreciate it. Good to see you.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Buck.
So, explain this to me, Steve. We have, there's obviously a chaos and mayhem over there. I think you and I would agree that the first priority has to be, and it is not for the Biden administration to be clear yet, it doesn't seem to be the case that it is based on the statements that are being made, getting Americans, all Americans, safely out of that country. But it seems that you're also of the mindset that we should not take these special immigrant visa recipients, and bring them to America. Why do you feel that way? Explain this one to me.
Sure. Well, first of all, I don't think this is a time for America to be welcoming migrants from anywhere. Okay, as a blanket statement, I think that is right now would be a sensible policy for us to take a pause on even legal migration, certainly illegal migration, and we should not be in the business of looking for new categories of migrants generally, but specifically to migrants from Afghanistan. And I do absolutely believe that we have a moral obligation to offer protection and refuge to people who took significant risks on behalf of the United States. I think that refuge should be provided in the region. We have a lot of military bases there. We have allies, countries that share the faith and culture of these Afghanis themselves. I think they should be resettled there temporarily, at least, if they want refuge. But in terms of bringing them to the United States, as I lay out in my article, I think there are two key reasons that we do not want a wave of migration from Afghanistan coming here. The first one is the experience of Europe with a large wave of Afghani migration that really started in 2015. And the results for Europe, it's not polite to talk about. A lot of people there even don't like talking about it, but the reality is of sexual assault, of systemic sexual assault from Afghani men committed against.
Could we separate out? I mean, there's mass migration, as in just everybody who wants to come to America, hop on a plane. But that's not what the SIV program is about. The SIV program is for Afghans who specifically qualified for taking risks themselves alongside often American soldiers. I knew some of these interpreters. I worked with some of these interpreters. We promised them under U.S. law. I mean, the United States government said, if you are an SIV, put aside whether we should just take everybody who wants to leave Afghanistan. That's not the case that we're talking about here, although we could discuss whether that could happen down the line. On SIVs specifically, why shouldn't the U.S. government make good on its promise? I mean, isn't the word of Uncle Sam supposed to mean something?
Well, the promise was never that you could become an American citizen. That was never promised. That you
get
resettlement.
It's green cards.
You get resettlement. No. I'm saying, hold on. I'm backing up before. I'm saying the SIV was a mistake. I'm saying that the promise, when we hired people to be interpreters, we never made a promise that, by the way, if things get rough, you get to come to the United States and we will pay for you to come to the United States and become either a permanent resident or a citizen. That was never a deal.
What do you think the promise was, Steve? And what do you think the SIV program is supposed to do?
No. Again, I'm not arguing with you on the SIV part of it. I'm saying that was a mistake, the SIV program. I think that we have a moral obligation to help people. We don't have a moral obligation to bring them to the United States just because they worked on our behalf. And by the way, I would also say this, even if we made that promise, we know from our experience in Afghanistan that among people who were completely, in our estimation, were completely vetted, people who were literally fighting alongside Americans, people in Afghan forces, Afghan police, people who were contractors for the American military, we still know that green on blue crime, insider attacks where they would literally turn their guns on Americans and even more so on their fellow Afghani citizens and their fellow Afghani fighters. This has been a systemic problem there for many, many years. And including
Yeah,
recently in the year
so
2019.
that's a real thing. But just so I'm clear, so we're separating out. So when you're in an article, you're talking about no mass migration. Do you just mean that as a general issue? But going again to the people that are trying to show their paperwork at Kabul airport right now and be evacuated, who have the paperwork that says the U.S. government promised me and my family that if we work along your soldiers or along your diplomats for now the 20-year war in Afghanistan, you're okay with those individuals being brought to the United States, or you don't want any of them being brought to the United States?
No Afghanis at all should be coming to the United States. And by the way, you mentioned a key part of it, which is the family. We don't know anything about the family. We have no idea who their family members are. So even if we think we know who the SIV applicant is or recipient is, even if we think that that person is safe, in almost all cases it's a man, if we think that man is safe to bring to the United States, we have no idea what his family is all about.
I mean, some people have been going through the process already for months, if not years, of the U.S. government trying to process their paperwork. I mean, look,
150 Americans were killed by friendly fire, essentially. It's not really the correct term because that means it's our own forces, but were killed by insider attacks in Afghanistan. At one point in 2012,
we leave the Terps. So I just want to be clear. So we leave the Terps behind. We leave them in Afghanistan. I'm sorry. We find somewhere else for them, but not America. Right. But who takes them?
I think that Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, I think all of these regional allies of ours, again, would be far better equipped to try to handle this kind of an influx. By the way, my preference would be that they actually stay there and fight for their country, that they actually stay. These are mostly young men, that they stay and fight for the kind of country they want to create. Now, again, I don't think we can compel that upon anybody.
Steve, you ever been downrange? You ever been downrange with any of these interpreters?
No.
Okay. All right, man. I appreciate it. It's an interesting point of view from you, and we'll continue to debate how we should best handle what is a Biden administration catastrophe. But for right now, man, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks for writing the article, and we'll have you back soon. We'll talk more about this. By next week, we'll know how bad it actually gets.
Okay. Thank you, Bud.
Thank you.